Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the X-Men as a mutant. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was a place of carefully managed fear, and 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya was one of the lucky ones. He was normal. He woke to the gentle hum of the air purifier in his small, meticulously tidy room. Sunlight, filtered through the dense Tokyo Prefecture haze, painted a pale stripe across his all-might comforter. For a moment, he was just a boy in a room, surrounded by the aspirational iconography of a bygone era. Silver Age all-might posters beamed down at him, fists on hips, their simple, four-color confidence a stark contrast to the world outside his window. He swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet meeting the cool wood of the floor. Normal. No strange energy thrumming under his skin, no odd growths or inconvenient appendages to hide. His morning routine was a litany of normalcy. Brush teeth. Wash face. Stare into the mirror and see nothing but a constellation of freckles, a shock of untamable green-black hair, and wide, expressive eyes that always seemed to hold a hint of disappointment. He was, in a world of terrifying genetic deviations, blessedly, painfully, ordinary. Downstairs, the news was on. His mother, Inko, stood by the stove, her movements a small, anxious ballet as she prepared breakfast. On the flat screen mounted to the wall, a stern-faced anchorwoman was discussing the Geneva Accords on mutant proliferation. Another unsanctioned power manifestation in Germany has led to a transportation network shutdown in Berlin, the anchorwoman said, her voice clipped and severe. Authorities are condemning the lack of a federally regulated registration system, citing Japan's Hero Charter as the gold standard for public safety. The screen cut to grainy cell phone footage. A terrified-looking teenager stood in the middle of a street, arcs of blue electricity crackling uncontrollably from his body. Cars were stalled, their lights flickering. People were screaming, running. The image was chaotic, terrifying. It was the face of fear that the rest of the world lived with. "Oh, that poor boy," Inko whispered, her back to Izuku. She wrung her hands on her apron. And all those people. The report then cut to a slickly produced segment on Japan's own heroes. A montage of Kamui Woods elegantly stopping a robbery, MT Lady posing for cameras after preventing a bridge collapse, and the indomitable Edge shot moving like a phantom. It was clean, controlled, and reassuring. The message was clear: outside Japan, mutants were a plague. Inside Japan, under the watchful eye of the Hero Public Safety Commission, they were assets. Tools, saviors, molded and sanctioned by the state. "Breakfast is ready," Izuku, Inko said, turning with a watery, practiced smile. She placed a bowl of rice and miso soup on the table. "Eat up. You don't want to be late." Her eyes flickered to the screen and then to her son, and the relief in them was a physical presence in the room. Relief that he was normal. That he would never be the boy on the screen crackling with deadly power, nor would he be a government-registered weapon. He would just be Izuku. Safe. Izuku knew he should be grateful. He was. But a part of him, a stubborn, foolish cinder of a dream, looked at the posters on his wall and the heroes on the screen and felt a profound, aching hollowness. The Hero Charter had made the world safer, yes, but it had also codified his dream into an impossibility. To be a hero, you needed a quirk, the Japanese government's sterile, approved term for the mutant gene, and not just any quirk. It had to be one deemed useful, controllable, and non-threatening to the public order. You were identified in childhood, registered, and your entire life path was set, guided by the HPSC. He was quirkless. A normal, as the parlance went. In a world where 99% of the population was like him, it should have been unremarkable. But in the microcosm of his life, dominated by the single, explosive exception of Katsuki Bakugo, it was a brand of shame. He finished his breakfast, grabbed his yellow backpack, and kissed his mother on the cheek. "I'm off. Be safe, Izuku," she called after him, her voice tight with the universal anxiety of mothers, amplified 1,000-fold by the world they lived in. The walk to Aldera Junior High was a study in this carefully constructed piece. The streets of Muzidafu were clean, the citizens orderly. There were subtle signs of the iron hand beneath the velvet glove, if you knew where to look. Small, discreet cameras on lampposts. HPSC patrol cars that glided by with unnerving silence. Public service announcements on digital billboards reminding citizens, see something, say something. Report all unregistered genetic expressions. He was halfway to school when he heard the familiar, grating voice. "Oi, Deku!" Izuku flinched. He turned to see Katsuki Bakugo and his two sycophants swaggering toward him. Bakugo, even at 14, carried himself with the unassailable arrogance of a national treasure. His quirk, the ability to secrete nitroglycerin like sweat and ignite it, was not just powerful. It was an A-rank, government-sanctioned power. From the moment it manifested, his life had been different. Special tutors, HPSC handlers, a fast-track application to the prestigious UA High, the premier training academy for state heroes. He wasn't just a teenager, he was an investment, and he never let anyone forget it. Still carrying that creepy notebook? Bakugo sneered, snatching the Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13 from Izuku's hands. What's the point? A normal like you trying to understand our world is like an ant trying to understand the sky. His cronies snickered. One of them, a boy with fingers that could extend unnaturally, tapped the book. He's a freak. A mutant wannabe. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Izuku, the normal, being called a freak by those whose very biology was a deviation. Give it back, Kaken, Izuku mumbled, his eyes fixed on the pavement. Bakugo's smile was pure malice. A small pop crackle erupted from his palm, and the notebook was instantly scorched, its edges blackened and smoking. He then casually tossed it over his shoulder into a nearby koi pond. You know, Bakugo said, leaning in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more threatening than any shout. The HPSC reps say my potential is limitless. That I'm the next All Might. People like me, we're the pillars that hold this country up. And you? He poked Izuku hard in the chest. You're just the dirt we stand on. You're useless. So stop trying. Stop dreaming. It's pathetic. He turned to walk away, then paused, a final thought occurring to him. He didn't even bother to look back. Actually, you know, if you really want to have a quirk so bad, there might be a shortcut. Just take a swan dive off the roof of the building. You might get born with one in your next life. The words hit Izuku like a physical blow. The air rushed out of his lungs. He stood frozen, listening to the fading laughter of Bakugo and his friends. He fished his soggy, ruined notebook out of the pond, clutching it to his chest. The ink was running, the caricature of All Might on the cover now a sad, watery mess. It wasn't just bullying. It was a declaration of his place in the world, delivered by someone who had been anointed by that same world as his superior. Izuku wasn't just weak, he was irrelevant. The rest of the day was a blur of humiliation and despair. He avoided everyone, the ghost of Bakugo's words clinging to him like a shroud. He was walking home, taking the long way under an overpass, when the universe decided that his day was not yet complete. A grotesque gurgle echoed from a nearby manhole. Before he could react, a monstrous wave of green, viscous sludge erupted from the sewer, two malevolent yellow eyes bobbing in the morass. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, the sludge villain rasped, its voice like gravel in a blender. You'll do perfectly. Terror, cold and absolute, seized Izuku. He was pinned, the foul-smelling liquid forcing its way into his mouth and nose. He clawed at the sludge, his fingers finding no purchase. His lungs burned. Black spots danced in his vision. I'm dying. I'm going to die here. Then, a thunderous voice. Have no fear, for I am here. The manhole cover shot off its housing like a cannonball. And there he was. All Might. Not a poster, not a video clip. The real, living man. His smile was a force of nature, a physical thing that seemed to warp the very air around it. Texas smash. The wind pressure alone was enough. The sludge villain was blasted apart, splattering against the tunnel walls. Izuku collapsed, gasping, air flooding his tortured lungs. All Might was already there, gently patting his cheek, his presence overwhelming. He had scooped the villain's remains into a soda bottle with practiced ease. The encounter played out in a surreal haze. Izuku, starstruck and babbling, got his notebook signed. He felt a desperate, insane hope bubble up inside him. This was it. This was his chance. He had to ask. As All Might prepared to leap away, Izuku did the stupidest, most reckless thing in his life. He latched onto the hero's leg. The flight was terrifying. The wind whipped at him, and All Might's frantic attempts to get him to let go only made him cling tighter. They landed roughly on a nearby rooftop. Young man, that was incredibly foolish. All Might scolded, his giant frame seeming to deflate slightly. I love my fans, but there are limits. And then it happened. As the hero turned, steam began to pour off his body. In a shocking, gruesome transformation, the mountain of muscle dissolved, revealing a skeletal man with hollowed eyes and a mop of blonde hair, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Izuku could only stare, horrified. All Might, the symbol of peace, the unshakable pillar of Japan's hero society, was a wraith. He explained the injury, the surgeries, the time limit on his power. He showed Izuku the horrific, crater-like scar on his torso, a wound that spoke of a battle far beyond anything the public had ever been shown. The truth was a crushing weight. The system, the symbol, it was all a fragile facade, maintained by one desperately ill man. Seeing this raw vulnerability, Izuku found his voice. The question that had defined his entire existence tumbled out. Even without a quirk, can I be a hero? Can someone normal ever hope to save people? All Might looked at him, and for a moment, Izuku saw not a hero, but just a tired man. The hero's answer was kind, but it was also a knife. Pro-heroes are always putting their lives on the line. Some villains can't be beaten without raw power. So no. I honestly don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. He spoke of the reality of their world, of the HPSC regulations, of the sheer danger. He advised him to become a police officer or a doctor. Good, noble, normal professions. It's not bad to dream, young man, but you have to be realistic. He left Izuku there, on the rooftop, the words echoing in the empty air. The final nail in the coffin of his childhood. Every hope he had ever harbored was officially, unequivocally dead. He trudged down the stairs, numb. An explosion rocked the street a few blocks away. A villain attack. Normally, he would have run towards it, notebook in hand. Today, he just kept walking. What was the point? But then he heard the panicked shouts. He saw the familiar spiky blonde hair, and the signature explosions. It was the same sludge villain. All Might must have dropped the bottle during their impromptu flight, and it had found a new hostage. It had Bakugo. The scene was one of contained chaos. The street was blocked off by a cordon of police. The pro-heroes were there, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, the rookie empty lady, but they were holding back. I can't get a grip on him. Death Arms yelled, his metallic arms skidding off the sludge. He's too fluid. My lacquered chains would just get stuck. Kamui Woods exclaimed, keeping his distance. The problem was Bakugo. His explosive quirk was a liability. He was thrashing, setting off uncontrolled blasts that ignited the gas lines in the surrounding buildings, turning the street into an inferno. The heroes couldn't risk getting close and setting off an even bigger explosion. They were following protocol, waiting for a hero with a more suitable quirk to arrive. It was a logical, tactical decision, but Izuku didn't see tactics. He saw his childhood friend, his tormentor, his rival, suffocating. He saw the look in Bakugo's eyes. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't anger. It was sheer, primal terror. And in that moment, something inside Izuku Midoriya broke. The world seemed to slow down. All Might's words, "You have to be realistic," warred with the desperate, frantic beating of his own heart. He saw the heroes doing nothing. He saw the crowd looking on, horrified but passive. And he saw Bakugo, the boy who represented everything he could never be, about to die because no one was willing to break the rules. No, the thought was not a conscious decision. It was a primal rejection of reality. He needs help. His legs moved. He wasn't running. He was sprinting. He shot past the police line, a sudden green blur of motion. Hey! Kid! Stop! Get back here, you idiot! He ignored them. His mind, the analytical engine he had honed for years, went into overdrive. The villain's eyes. They're solid. If I can just hit them, create a distraction. He swung his yellow backpack off his shoulder, a pathetic, desperate weapon. He flung it at the villain's face. A textbook and a pencil case struck one of the giant yellow eyes. The villain roared in pain and surprise, its grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Air. Bakugo managed to gasp a ragged breath. Deku? He choked out, his eyes wide with disbelief. What the hell are you doing here? I don't know. Izuku screamed, clawing uselessly at the sludge, trying to free Bakugo. My legs they just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. For one single, incandescent moment, Bakugo saw him. Not the useless, quirkless Deku. He saw a hero. The sludge villain recovered its senses, its rage magnified. You little gnat! I'm going to enjoy killing you both. It surged forward, a tidal wave of sentient filth, ready to engulf them. Death was a certainty. In that split second, as the world contracted to that single, horrifying point of impact, Izuku felt something new. It wasn't a thought. It was a feeling. A deep, resonant hum that started in the marrow of his bones. For 14 years, his body had been a silent, passive vessel, soaking up the ambient energy of the world around him. The kinetic energy of the city, the emotional turmoil of his own life, the raw power of All Might's presence just moments before, all of it had been stored, stockpiled in a genetic vault he never knew he possessed. The desperation to save Bakugo. The terror of his own imminent death. The sheer, overwhelming will to act. It was the key turning in a lock that had been sealed for a lifetime. The hum became a roar. The world didn't slow down, it stopped. Time, sound, light, it all seemed to bend around his right arm. He felt a pressure building, a sensation like a star being born inside his elbow. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't even think to. He just reached out, a final, desperate act to push Bakugo away from the oncoming doom, and his power, the sum total of 14 years of latent energy, was released. There was no sound, at first. Just a silent, concussive push. The air in front of his hand compressed until it became a solid wall, and then it shattered. A shockwave, pure and colorless, erupted from his palm. It was not a punch, not a force directed at a single point. It was a catastrophic, omnidirectional detonation of kinetic energy. The sludge villain didn't just get blown away. It was atomized. The liquid that composed its body was instantly vaporized, the sheer force shredding it on a molecular level. It simply ceased to exist. Bakugo was thrown backward, saved from the worst of the blasts by Izuku's own body, and landed in a heap 20 feet away, stunned but alive. But the wave didn't stop. It hit the street like a hammer blow from God. The asphalt buckled and split, a spiderweb of cracks racing outwards from where Izuku stood. The storefronts on either side of the alleyway imploded, their windows disintegrating into a storm of crystalline dust. Cars parked along the curb were lifted and tossed like toys, their alarms screaming in a unified chorus of electronic panic. The lampposts bent sideways, their lights popping in showers of sparks. The very air shrieked. Further out, the effect lessened, but it was still devastating. Windows rattled and broke for 3 city blocks. Civilians who had been watching from a safe distance were knocked from their feet, their ears ringing, their bodies peppered with debris. The shockwave continued upwards, a visible ripple in the atmosphere that disturbed the clouds, and at the epicenter of it all stood Izuku Midoriya. Or rather, he was collapsing. The moment the energy left him, the agony hit. The sound he heard wasn't the explosion, it was the wet, grinding crackle of every bone in his right arm, from his fingertips to his shoulder, simultaneously turning to powder. The recoil was immense, throwing him backward like a rag doll. He hit the fractured pavement with a sickening thud, his vision widening out from the pain. His arm was a ruin. A mangled, purple and red sleeve of flesh, bent at impossible angles, blood seeping through the tattered remains of his school uniform. It didn't even feel like a part of him anymore. It was just a source of pure, blinding, world-ending agony. Silence. For a long, terrible moment, the only sound was the tinkling of falling glass and the distant wail of car alarms. The dust began to settle, revealing a scene of utter devastation. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The pro-heroes stared, their professional composure shattered. Death Arms was on the ground, shielding his head. Kamui Woods was tangled in his own branches, which had reflexively grown to protect him. They looked at the destroyed street, at the dazed and bleeding civilians, and then at the small, broken boy lying in the center of a crater of his own making. This wasn't a rescue. It was a catastrophe. Bakugo pushed himself up, his ears ringing. He looked at his hands, then at the spot where the villain had been, then at Izuku's unmoving form. The terror he had felt while captured was nothing compared to the cold dread that now filled him. That power, it wasn't heroic. It was unnatural. Monstrous. It was the kind of power the news warned you about. All Might, in his skeletal form, watched from a hidden alleyway, his heart a block of ice in his chest. What have I done? What is that, boy? The silence was broken by the wail of approaching sirens, not just ambulances, but something else. Sleek, black vehicles with no markings descended on the scene with chilling speed and precision. Doors opened and men in sharp, dark suits and earpieces emerged, moving with an unnerving, synchronized purpose. They weren't police. They were HPSC. Internal security. Leading them was a man whose placid expression was more unnerving than any scowl. He was lean and handsome, with sharp features and sleepy, intelligent eyes. A pair of small, crimson feathers were tucked behind his ears, the only hint of flair on his otherwise sterile person. This was Agent Taka, one of the HPSC's top troubleshooters, a man known for his ruthless efficiency. His gaze swept over the scene, his mind cataloging the damage, the power signature, the cost. He didn't see a tragedy. He saw an equation that needed to be solved. His eyes finally landed on Izuku, who was now barely conscious, whimpering in a haze of pain. Taka's expression didn't change. He saw the mangled arm, the school uniform, the childish face. It meant nothing. What he saw was an unregistered, Omega-level power manifestation in the middle of a civilian population center. He saw a threat. A weapon that had just gone off by accident. He knelt beside Izuku, his movements smooth and economical. Subject is a male, estimated age 14 to 15. Unregistered. Kinetic energy quirk of catastrophic scale. Secure him. 2 agents moved in, producing a set of heavy, metallic braces. They weren't handcuffs. They were power dampeners. They clamped one around Izuku's uninjured arm and another around his ankle. They felt cold, heavy, and deadening. Izuku's foggy mind tried to process what was happening. Heroes, he'd saved Kaken. Why were these men? My arm. He managed to gasp out. The pain will be managed once you are in a secure facility, Taka said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. Do not resist. Wait. He saved me. Bakugo shouted, taking a step forward. An HPSC agent put a firm hand on his chest, stopping him. Young Bakugo, Taka said, not even turning to look at him. Your debriefing will be in an hour. For now you are a witness. Do not interfere. The final, heart-wrenching sound was the scream. Izuku! Inko Midoriya pushed through the police line, her face a mask of raw terror. She had heard the explosion from their apartment, and had run, a mother's instinct overriding everything else. She saw the destruction, and then she saw her son, her normal, precious son, being fitted with restraints by cold-eyed government men, his arm a bloody ruin. What are you doing? He's just a boy. He's hurt, she cried, trying to run to him. Agent Taka stood up and turned to face her, his body language creating an impassable barrier. Ma'am, for your own safety, you need to stay back. Your son has been involved in a serious incident. Incident? He's a child. He needs a hospital. He will receive the necessary care, Taka stated, his voice flat, final. After he has been debriefed and contained. He is a person of interest in what is now being classified as a mutant terrorist attack. The words hung in the air, monstrous and absurd. Mutant. Terrorist. They were lifting Izuku onto a stretcher now. The pain was an ocean, and he was drowning in it. Through a slit of vision, he saw his mother's anguished face. He saw Bakugo's shocked and fearful expression. He saw the pro-heroes looking away, complicit in their silence. He saw the cold, judging eyes of the crowd. No one saw a hero. They saw a monster. As they loaded him into the black van, the world began to fade. The last thing he heard was a reporter on the scene, already broadcasting the official story. An unprecedented event in Mutant today, as an unregistered mutant has unleashed a devastating power, causing millions in property damage and injuring dozens. Officials are calling it the worst case of unsanctioned quirk use in a decade. The van door slid shut, plunging him into darkness. He was alone, cradling the shattered remnants of his arm, his body, and his dream. He had acted like a hero, and the world had branded him a villain for it. He was no longer Izuku Midoriya, the normal boy. He was a number. A threat. A mutant. And he was terrified. The first sensation was not pain. It was an unnatural quiet. A profound, muffling silence that seemed to have been injected directly into his veins. Izuku Midoriya drifted up from a black, dreamless abyss into a world of sterile white. A low, electronic hum vibrated through the mattress beneath him, a constant, invasive thrum that felt like it was trying to lull his very atoms to sleep. He blinked, his vision swimming. The ceiling was a grid of acoustic tiles, a single, recessed light panel glowing with a flat, merciless glare. He tried to move, to sit up, but his body felt impossibly heavy, his limbs unresponsive. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the sedative haze. He turned his head. His left arm was strapped to the bed rail, and 4 lines snaking from his wrist to a softly beeping machine. He looked to his right. Where his arm should have been, there was a bulky, matte black construct. It wasn't a cast. A cast was for healing. This was something else. It encased his entire arm from shoulder to fingertips, segmented like armor, with no visible seams or locks. It was cold to the touch, heavy, and exuded a strange, energy-deadening field. It didn't just contain his ruined limb. It felt like it was suffocating something inside him. A presence he hadn't even known was there until it was being choked. The memories came back in a brutal, disjointed flood. The sludge villain. Bakugo's terrified eyes. The feeling of running when he should have been frozen. And then, the push. The silent detonation. The world-shattering pain as his bones turned to dust. The screams. His mother's anguished face. The cold, empty eyes of the men in suits. Mutant. Terrorist. The words echoed in the silent room, a verdict already delivered. A soft click, and a disembodied voice filled the room, smooth and impersonal, coming from a hidden speaker. Subject Delta. Your vital signs indicate you have regained consciousness. Do not be alarmed. You are in a secure medical wing of a Hero Public Safety Commission facility. Izuku flinched at the designation. Subject Delta. Not Izuku. Not even Midoriya. He was an object, a data point. Where am I? He rasped, his throat dry and raw. Where's my mom? Your family has been notified that you are in protective custody, the voice replied, the term protective feeling like a cruel joke. Your health and the stability of your condition are our primary concerns. A doctor will not be seeing you. Your case is being managed by specialists. Please remain calm. An agent will be in shortly to begin your debriefing. The speaker clicked off, leaving him once again in the humming silence. The sedative was wearing off, and with its departure, the pain began to creep in. It was a deep, grinding ache from his shattered arm, a phantom agony that the dampening brace did nothing to soothe. But it was dwarfed by the fear. This wasn't a hospital. It was a cage. He was a prisoner, and he didn't even know the nature of his crime, other than the fact that his own body had betrayed him. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a room that was the antithesis of his own. It was a gray, featureless box, empty save for a single metal table and 2 chairs. Agent Taka, the man with the crimson feathers from the scene, stepped through. He moved with a languid, predatory grace, holding a thin data slate in one hand. He wore the same impeccably tailored suit, his expression one of mild, academic interest. He didn't enter Izuku's cell. Instead, he gestured for 2 guards to enter. They unstrapped Izuku from the bed, his legs unsteady beneath him. The dampener on his arm felt like a lead weight. They guided him, half carrying him, into the gray room and sat him in one of the chairs. The door hissed shut behind them, leaving him alone with Taka. A pane of dark, reflective glass dominated one wall, He knew instinctively that people were watching. Taka sat opposite him, placing the slate on the table. He steepled his fingers, his gaze calm and analytical. He wasn't looking at a terrified 14-year-old boy. He was examining a fascinating, dangerous specimen. Izuku Midoriya, Taka began, his voice the same even tone as the speaker. Born in Yuzurifu. Age 14. Registered as quirkless. A normal. And yet, yesterday, at 17:03, you produced an energy signature that overloaded every sensor in a 5-block radius. The official designation is an uncontrolled kinetic energy expulsion. An Omega-level event. The property damage is estimated at 4.2 billion yen. 27 civilians were hospitalized with non-critical injuries. 4 pro-heroes were temporarily incapacitated. And one sludge-based villain was, well, the word we're using is disintegrated. He paused, letting the clinical facts hang in the air. Izuku could only stare, his mind reeling. Omega level. A term he'd only read about in speculative pre-charter articles about the most powerful and dangerous mutants in the world. I didn't mean to, Izuku whispered, tears welling in his eyes. I was just trying to save Kaken. The villain was going to kill him, Katsuki Bakugo, Taka said, tapping his slate. A-rank pyrokinetic potential. A prime HPSC asset. Your intervention, while catastrophically destructive, did indeed save him. That is the single mitigating factor in your file. The only reason we are having this conversation, and you are not in a permanent stasis crypt. The casual mention of a stasis crypt sent a fresh wave of ice through Izuku's veins. So, we have a paradox, Taka continued, leaning forward slightly. A boy with the heart of a hero, and a power that functions like a tactical nuclear device. You cannot exist in public society, Izuku. You understand that, don't you? One bad day, one moment of lost control, and Muzurifu Ward ceases to exist. Your quirk is not a tool. It is a natural disaster waiting to happen. Izuku's analytical mind, his one true asset, began to churn, a desperate defense mechanism. He started muttering, the words tumbling out in a frantic stream. But it could be controlled, maybe with training, or support gear to channel the energy. If it's kinetic, it must follow the laws of physics, so there must be a way to regulate the output, maybe by venting it slowly or storing it in a capacitor of some kind. Enough, Taka said, his voice cutting through the muttering like a scalpel. The command was quiet but held absolute authority. Izuku fell silent. Your analysis is rudimentary, but not incorrect, Taka conceded. The HPSC has 2 primary paths for an anomaly like you. Path 1, weaponization. You would be assigned to a specialist RD division. You would spend the rest of your life here, or in a facility just like it. Your power would be studied, honed, and weaponized. We would build the support gear you speak of. You would become our tool, our symbol of peace, deployed under our strict control to handle threats that even All Might cannot. Your life would have purpose, but it would not be your own. You would see your mother on supervised visits, twice a year. You would be a living weapon. He let the horrifying picture sink in before continuing. Path 2, Taka said, his voice dropping slightly, is for assets deemed too unstable. If we determine that the risk of you losing control, even with our training, is too high, if the weapon is more likely to blow up in our own hands, then you are a liability. And liabilities must be neutralized. We would deem you unrecoverable, and you would be decommissioned, painlessly of course. For the good of the nation, decommissioned. Neutralized. He spoke of ending a life as if he were discussing the scrapping of faulty equipment. Tears streamed freely down Izuku's face now. He was shaking, not just from fear, but from a profound, soul-crushing despair. These were his choices, to be a slave or to be executed. The heroism, the desire to save, it didn't matter. To them, he was just a problem to be solved. I'm not a weapon, he choked out. I'm not a monster. The world will see the footage of that street and decide otherwise, Taka said, standing up. You have 24 hours to consider your options. Contemplate what it is you truly want. To be a useful tool, or a forgotten tragedy. A medical team will be in to administer nutrients and a sedative. Cooperate. He walked to the door, pausing before it slid open. And Izuku? Hope is a luxury for those with a future. I'd advise you to stop indulging in it. The door hissed shut. The guards returned, their movements efficient and impersonal. Izuku didn't resist as they led him back to the White Room, strapped him in, and administered another injection. As the drugs dragged him back under, his last coherent thought was a cry of pure, silent anguish. He was utterly, hopelessly alone, thousands of miles away, in a place of rolling green hills and old-world architecture. Charles Xavier felt the echo of that cry. He was in Cerebro. The chamber was a sphere of polished, non-ferrous metal, cool and dark. He sat in his wheelchair at the center, the iconic helmet covering his head and eyes. To an outsider, it was a marvel of technology. To Xavier, it was an extension of his own mind, an amplifier that allowed his consciousness to stretch across the globe, to touch the minds of his fellow mutants. He would often scan, not to pry, but to listen for the psychic flares of new mutants whose powers were manifesting, often in fear and pain. He was a lighthouse keeper, searching for lost ships in a storm. Yesterday, he had felt a supernova. A psychic detonation of raw, untamed power from the east coast of Japan, so immense it had momentarily whited out his senses. It wasn't malicious. It felt desperate, accidental. And it was followed, almost immediately, by a psychic signature being forcibly suppressed, blanketed by technology. Now, he was searching for the aftershock. He filtered out the billions of normal human minds, the ambient psychic noise of the planet. He focused on the unique frequency of the mutant gene. He found the familiar lights of his X-Men, his students, Magneto's Brotherhood. But he pushed past them, searching for the ghost of that explosion, and then he found it. A pinprick. A tiny, flickering ember of a mind, trapped in a cage of despair so profound it was like a psychic black hole. The sheer weight of the boy's hopelessness was a palpable thing. Aurora Monroe Storm stood at the entrance to the chamber, her white hair a stark contrast to the dark metal. She could feel the change in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in temperature that always accompanied the professor's deeper concentrations. "Charles?" she asked, her voice calm and resonant. "What is it?" Xavier removed the helmet, his brow furrowed with deep concern. "I've found him, Aurora. The source of the energy surge from Japan. Is he a threat?" "He is a child," Xavier said, his voice heavy with empathy. "A child who is terrified, alone, and in the hands of a government that sees him as a thing to be either used or discarded. The HPSC, their methods are efficient, I'll grant them that. But they are utterly devoid of compassion. They are drowning him in despair." He closed his eyes, focusing. "Their facility is shielded, but the boy's mind, his grief is so powerful it is practically leaking through the cracks. I think I can reach him. Is that wise, Charles?" Aurora cautioned, stepping closer. "Direct psychic contact with an unknown, Omega-level mutant who has no control could be dangerous. And the HPSC is notoriously isolationist. They will view any interference as an act of aggression. What is the alternative?" Xavier countered, his blue eyes meeting hers. "To leave him to them? To let them break him and turn him into a weapon, or extinguish his light entirely? We are the X-Men. We stand for those who have no one else to stand for them. If we don't help him, who will?" Aurora nodded, her regal features softening. She had been that lost child once. She understood. "What do you need?" "Have the Blackbird prepped," Xavier commanded. "And assemble the team. I want Logan, Kurt, and yourself. We need precision, non-lethal force, and a quick extraction. This is a rescue mission, not an invasion." As Aurora left to carry out his orders, Xavier closed his eyes again, his mind reaching across oceans and continents, following the thread of a single boy's pain, preparing to whisper a promise into the darkness. Izuku surfaced from the drug-induced stupor into the same white nightmare. Nothing had changed. The hum, the light, the cold, dead weight on his arm. Taka's words replayed in his mind. Weapon or scrap heap? He thought of his mother. Would he ever see her again? Would she be told he had died in an accident? The thought was a fresh stab of agony. He squeezed his eyes shut, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. It was over. There was no way out. "Hello?" The voice was not in the room. It was in his head. It was a gentle, warm baritone, like the voice of a kind grandfather. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He looked around the empty cell, his heart hammering against his ribs. I am not one of your captors. Please try to remain calm. My name is Charles Xavier. Izuku was trembling. Was he hallucinating? Was this another one of their tricks? A trick to see if I'm unstable? No, my boy. This is not a trick, the voice soothed, responding to his frantic thought. I am speaking to you from a great distance away. I lead a school for people like us. For mutants. Mutant. The word Taka had used. The word the news had used. A curse. It is not a curse, Xavier's voice insisted gently. It is simply what you are. And you are not alone. I felt your power when it was released. And I have felt your despair ever since. It is a heavy burden for one so young to carry. The simple validation, the acknowledgement of his pain, was overwhelming. Izuku broke down into silent, racking sobs. I know you are frightened, the voice continued, a wave of pure, unadulterated empathy washing over him. It wasn't a mind-reading probe. It was a feeling, a shared emotion. They have told you that you are a monster, a weapon. But I know the truth. I felt it in the shape of your power. You were trying to save someone, weren't you? Izuku's breath hitched. Yes, he thought, the word a desperate prayer. I was trying to save him, I know. And that, Izuku Midoriya, is the heart of a hero. The power is new and frightening, but the heart is what truly matters. Your power does not have to be a curse. It can be a gift. But you need to learn. You need a safe place to grow, to train, to understand what you are. My school can be that place for you. A flicker of hope, so small and fragile he was afraid to even acknowledge it, ignited in the darkness of his chest. A school? For people like him? It sounded like a fantasy. It is real, Xavier promised. And we are coming for you. A team is on its way right now. They are my X-Men. They will be there soon. They will look different. But do not be afraid. They are here to help you. Can you be brave for just a little while longer, Izuku? Izuku didn't know if he could believe it. It seemed too impossible. But Taka had told him to abandon hope. And this voice, this kind, gentle presence, was offering it to him like a lifeline. He clung to it. Yes, he thought, wiping his tears with his one good hand. I can. Good lad, the voice said, a sense of warmth and approval flowing through him. We are on our way. Hold on. The psychic presence receded, leaving the room feeling colder and emptier than before, but now, the silence was not one of despair. It was one of anticipation. The Blackbird, a masterpiece of sheer technology and human ingenuity, sliced through the stratosphere above the Pacific Ocean, its stealth systems rendering it invisible to every known form of detection. Inside the cockpit, Storm piloted the jet with focused grace, her hands moving over the controls as if they were an extension of her own will. In the passenger bay, the mood was tense. Wolverine sat sharpening one of his claws on a piece of scrap metal, the snick-snick-snicked a rhythmic, grating sound. He was already in his yellow and brown X-Men uniform. Japan, he grumbled, not looking up. Hate the food. And the HPSC are a bunch of glorified hall monitors with tactical gear. This is gonna be a mess, bub. Their isolationist policies regarding their mutant population have always been troubling, Storm said from the cockpit, her voice clear over the intercom. They treat them as state property. This extraction must be clean, Logan. No casualties. We are rescuing a child, not starting a war. Yeah, a clean extraction from a black site run by spooks halfway across the world. Easy peasy, Logan grunted, sheathing his claw. Across from him sat Nightcrawler, his blue-furred form coiled in a meditative posture, his yellow eyes closed, his three-fingered hands clasped in prayer. His red and black uniform was a stark contrast to his demonic appearance. He opened his eyes, their golden light soft and compassionate. The professor sounded more concerned than I have heard him in years, Kurt Wagner said, his German accent soft. This boy, to be so young and to be in such pain. God im Himmel, we must not fail. Logan grunted again, a sound that could have meant anything from agreement to dismissal. But he respected Kurt. They all did. Storm's voice came over the intercom again. We are approaching the target. 5 minutes to the drop zone. The facility is located in a remote, mountainous region west of Tokyo. According to the professor's psychic probe, it's heavily guarded, not just by HPSC agents, but by a roster of their registered pro heroes on security detail. Pros? Logan snorted. Great. Glory hounds? Be serious, Logan, Storm chided. They will be formidable. Kurt, you are on infiltration and extraction. Your primary target is the boy. Logan and I will create a diversion at the main gate. A little wind and fog, a show of claws, enough to draw their attention. We go in fast, we get the kid, and we are gone before they can scramble their high-end assets. Understood? Ja verstanden, Kurt said, standing up and stretching, his prehensile tail flicking behind him. Let's get it over with, Logan said, cracking his neck. The blackbird descended, silent as a ghost. Below, nestled in a dark valley, was a stark, windowless concrete complex, surrounded by electrified fences and watchtowers. It was a fortress. The game was on. The first sign that something was wrong was a sudden, unnatural fog that rolled down the mountainside, thick and disorienting, swallowing the perimeter lights. The guards in the watchtowers squinted, their thermal scopes suddenly useless as the temperature dropped 20 degrees in 30 seconds. Then came the attack on the main gate. A localized cyclone, a miniature tornado, touched down with surgical precision, ripping the reinforced steel gate from its hinges and tossing it into the woods. Out of the swirling fog and debris stepped two figures. A woman with stark white hair and glowing eyes, floating a foot off the ground, and a short, absurdly muscular man in a yellow costume, 3 metal claws extending from each fist with a sound that sent shivers down the spine. Alarms blared across the complex. Intruders at the main gate. All security teams, converge. We have 2 unknown mutant hostiles. Inside the facility, pro-hero Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa, was already moving. He was off-duty, serving his mandatory HPSC security rotation, and he was not happy about the paperwork this would generate. He pulled his signature yellow goggles over his eyes, his capture weapon unfurling from around his neck. All non-combatants to the safe rooms. Present Mike with me. The rest of you, hold the perimeter. While the facility's forces scrambled towards the diversion, a faint smell of brimstone and ozone filled a darkened corridor deep inside the medical wing. Bam! Nightcrawler appeared in a puff of acrid purple smoke, his yellow eyes adjusting instantly to the dim light. He consulted a mental map provided by Xavier. The boy's cell was at the end of the hall. He moved with silent, acrobatic grace, a blue phantom clinging to the shadows. He took out 2 guards with swift, non-lethal strikes to their pressure points, leaving them unconscious before they even knew he was there. He reached the cell door. Heavy-duty titanium alloy. A quick glance at the electronic lock told him it was biosealed. Logan's job. But Logan was outside. Kurt smiled. Sometimes doors were just suggestions. He concentrated, picturing the space on the other side. With another sulfurous BMF, he was through. Izuku, startled by the sound and smell, scrambled back on the bed, his eyes wide with terror. The figure that had appeared in his room was the stuff of nightmares. Blue skin, pointed ears, a long, demonic tail, and glowing golden eyes. This was a rescuer? This was a demon. Fear not, mein Freund, Kurt said, his voice gentle, holding up his 3-fingered hands in a placating gesture. Professor Xavier sent me. My name is Kurt. We are here to take you home. The kindness in the demon's eyes, the mention of Xavier's name, it was enough. Izuku nodded, his fear giving way to a desperate, wild hope. Suddenly, the corridor outside erupted in a deafening sonic blast. Yeeyawa! Intruder spotted, Kurt winced, covering his pointed ears. Present Mike. This complicates things. Through the reinforced window of the cell door, he saw Aizawa, his eyes glowing a faint red, his capture weapon whipping through the air. No teleporting out of this one, villain, Aizawa said, his voice a low growl. His gaze was locked on Kurt. Erasure. Kurt felt it instantly, a strange emptiness, a severing of his connection to the dimension he used for travel. He was grounded. I am no villain! Kurt yelled, turning to Izuku. Stay back! Aizawa's capture weapon shot through the window, which shattered inwards. The tough alloy ribbons wrapped around Kurt's torso, but his inhuman agility saved him. He twisted, using his tail to bat away the worst of it, and dove into the corridor. The two engaged in a frantic, close-quarters ballet. Aizawa, the master of quirk-canceling combat, against Kurt, the master acrobat. But it was a losing fight for Kurt. Aizawa was relentless. He was about to fully ensnare him when a flash of lightning illuminated the corridor, followed by a blast of frigid air. The floor became a sheet of ice. Aizawa slipped, his concentration breaking for a split second as he struggled to keep his footing. In that instant, Kurt's power returned. He didn't hesitate. BMF. He was back in the cell. BMF. He was beside Izuku. He grabbed the boy's uninjured shoulder. Hold on tight, BMF. They were gone. They reappeared in a disorienting explosion of smoke and displaced air on the open ramp of the Blackbird, which hovered silently 100 feet above the caves. Logan was there, pulling them both aboard. Got the package, he grunted. Ororo, hit it! My pleasure, Storm's voice replied. With a final, massive gust of wind that sent the HPSC forces scattering, the Blackbird's ramp closed, and it ascended, vanishing into the night sky as if it had never been there at all. Down below, Agent Taka arrived in the medical wing to a scene of chaos. Ice-covered floors, a shattered cell window, and 2 unconscious guards. He walked into the empty cell. The floor was ripped out. The bed was empty. The containment brace, however, was still there, lying on the floor, sliced cleanly in 2 with 3 parallel gouges. Claw marks. His serene mask finally cracked. A flicker of cold, unadulterated fury passed through his eyes. They hadn't just breached his facility. They hadn't just fought his assets. They had stolen his weapon. He picked up a small data chip one of his agents handed him, a security recording from the corridor, just before the sonic blast. He played it on his slate. He saw the blue-skinned creature appear, a known international mutant terrorist. An X-Man. Xavier, Taka whispered, the name tasting like poison. So, the old fool had finally decided to interfere in Japan's affairs. He had stolen a priceless, albeit dangerous, piece of government property. This was no longer a simple containment issue. This was an international incident. And he would get his property back. No matter the cost. The transition was a violent assault on the senses. One moment, Izuku was in the sterile, terrifying confines of the HPSC facility. The next, he was engulfed in a cloud of purple smoke that smelled of brimstone and burned ozone. His stomach lurched, the world twisting inside out for a nauseating microsecond. He landed hard on a cold metal floor, the jolt sending a fresh, electric spike of agony up his ruined arm. He cried out, instinctively cradling the limb that was no longer encased in its suppressive shell. He was on the ramp of a sleek, black aircraft that looked more like a shard of obsidian than any vehicle he had ever seen. The wind whipped at his thin hospital gown, cold and sharp. Below him, the HPSC facility was a chaotic diorama of flashing lights and scurrying figures, shrinking with astonishing speed as the jet ascended vertically into the night. The demon-like man named Kurt was beside him, a steadying hand on his good shoulder. Another figure, short, impossibly broad, and clad in a garish yellow and brown costume, was pulling them fully inside. Got the package? The gruff man grunted, 3 long, metallic claws retracting into his knuckles with a wet, visceral snick. The sound made Izuku flinch. Ororo, hit it! A woman's voice, regal and calm, answered from the cockpit. My pleasure. The ramp hissed shut, sealing them in. The sense of acceleration was immense but smooth, pressing him back against the wall. Through a small viewport, he saw the curve of the earth, a blue and white jewel hanging in a sea of impossible blackness dotted with stars. They were in space. They had been on the ground in Japan mere seconds ago. The sheer technological impossibility of it all was too much for his reeling mind. The pain, the fear, the disorientation, it all crested in a wave of overwhelming shock. His vision tunneled, the edges turning gray. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the face of the blue man, Kurt, his demonic features etched with gentle concern. He is in shock, Kurt said, his voice urgent. And that arm? Got him Himmel, he needs Hank. The gruff man, Logan, stated simply. Now, Izuku's next awakening was softer. The violent lurch of teleportation was replaced by the gentle scent of antiseptic and old books. The hard metal floor was now a soft, comfortable bed. He was beneath a thick, woolen blanket, and the oppressive hum of the HPSC facility was gone, replaced by the faint, distant sounds of life, a bird chirping outside a window, the low murmur of voices from far away, the rustle of leaves in the wind. He opened his eyes. He wasn't in a cell. He was in a room that felt warm and lived in. Wooden floors, a mahogany desk cluttered with medical texts and complex-looking blueprints, a shelf filled with vials and beakers, and a large bay window that looked out onto a sprawling, emerald-green lawn bathed in the golden light of an early morning sun. "Ah, you're awake!" "Excellent." The voice was deep, cultured, and resonant. Izuku turned his head. Sitting in a leather armchair beside his bed was a man, or rather, a creature, of such astonishing appearance that Izuku's brain momentarily refused to process what it was seeing. He was massive, covered from head to toe in thick, blue fur, much like Kurt's but deeper, almost indigo. He had the powerful, broad-shouldered build of a gorilla, but the refined facial structure of a scholar, complete with a pair of reading glasses perched on his broad nose. He wore a white lab coat over a tweed waistcoat and neatly pressed trousers, and was currently reading a leather-bound copy of Shakespeare's The Tempest. He looked up, his yellow, intelligent eyes crinkling at the corners. "Easy now, son," the creature said, his voice a gentle rumble. "You've been through a significant ordeal. Physical trauma, extreme stress, and a rather rapid, high-altitude extraction. It's a wonder you're conscious at all." Izuku could only stare, his mouth agape. The creature smiled, a flash of surprisingly human-looking teeth behind his fanged lips. "Forgive my lack of a proper introduction. My name is Dr. Henry McCoy. My friends, for reasons of both affection and obvious aesthetics, call me Beast." He placed his book down, his large, blue-furred hands moving with a surgeon's delicacy. "I am the head of medical and scientific research here at the Xavier Institute. I've taken the liberty of treating your arm." Izuku's gaze shot to his right arm. The HPSC dampener was gone. In its place was a clean, white, and remarkably advanced-looking cast. It was lightweight but rigid, with several small, glowing blue panels embedded in its surface. Protruding from it were dozens of hair-thin wires, all of which connected to a complex monitor beside his bed that displayed a cascade of incomprehensible data: biosignatures, energy readings, cellular regeneration rates. "The damage was extensive," Beast said, his tone shifting from jovial to serious. "I've never seen such comprehensive comminution in every single bone from the distal phalanges to the humeral head. It wasn't a break, it was a detonation. The HPSC's device was a crude suppressor, but it likely prevented total necrotic decay. I've had to set what bone fragments I could and have initiated a low-level regenerative field to encourage cellular repair. It will be a very, very long road to recovery, I'm afraid." He adjusted his glasses, peering at the monitor. "But what's truly fascinating is the energy residue. Your mutation, young man, is unlike anything I have ever encountered." The HPSC flagged it as kinetic energy expulsion, which is like calling a supernova a bit of a flash. It's more accurate to say your body possesses a unique gene for kinetic energy transduction and amplification. You absorb and store ambient energy over time. Yesterday, in a moment of extreme duress, you released it. All of it. Izuku listened, mesmerized. For the first time, someone was explaining what had happened to him not as a crime or a catastrophe, but as a scientific phenomenon. It was terrifying, but it was also understandable. "My analysis, my mutterings," Izuku began, his voice still hoarse. "I thought maybe it could be controlled." Beast's furry face broke into a wide, genuine grin. "A kindred spirit?" "Yes, precisely. Control is the key. Your body, as it is an insufficient vessel for such power. The backlash is what shattered your arm. It's like trying to fire a cannonball from a cardboard tube. The tube will invariably be destroyed. Our goal, therefore, will be twofold: to strengthen the cannon, and to build a better tube." He gestured around the infirmary. "And this is the place to do it. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya, to the Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters." The name sounded so grand, so hopeful. Gifted youngsters? A term the professor prefers over mutants, Beast explained. He believes it frames our condition as a gift to be nurtured, rather than a curse to be feared. This is a school, Izuku, a safe haven where young people with unique genetic expressions can learn to understand and control their abilities, all while receiving a first-rate education. A school. A haven. It was exactly as the voice had promised. The reality of it, the sheer, solid truth of the room around him, was starting to sink in. He was safe. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a knot of terror deep in his stomach began to loosen. The infirmary door swung open, and the man from his vision, from his mind, wheeled himself in. He looked older in person, his face lined with the quiet wisdom and subtle weariness of a long and difficult life. But his eyes were the same, a brilliant, piercing blue, full of compassion and intelligence. He was Charles Xavier. Dr. McCoy, I see our guest is awake, Professor Xavier said, his voice the same warm baritone from Izuku's cell. How is he? Physically, he will recover, though it will be a slow process, Beast reported. Psychologically, well, that is more your field of expertise, Professor. Xavier wheeled himself to Izuku's bedside, his presence radiating an aura of profound calm. Izuku. It is a genuine pleasure to meet you in person. I am Charles Xavier. I apologize for the dramatic nature of your arrival, but I'm afraid circumstances necessitated a certain expediency. You saved me, Izuku said, the words feeling inadequate. Why? You don't even know me. I know enough, Xavier replied with a gentle smile. I know that you were alone and afraid, and that you were being punished for an act of selfless heroism. That is more than enough reason for us to act. Here, at this school, we believe that power does not define a person. Character does. And from what I have seen, your character, Izuku Midoriya, is truly exceptional. Izuku felt a blush creep up his neck. To be praised by this man, to be seen not as a threat but as a hero, was a feeling so new and overwhelming he didn't know how to respond. No, Xavier continued. I imagine you have a great many questions. And you must be hungry. Hank, would you be so kind as to inform the kitchen? And perhaps you could ask Kitty to come down? I think she would be the ideal person to give Izuku a tour, once he's up to it. Of course, Professor, Beast said, standing up. He gave Izuku a friendly nod. Rest for a bit, son. We'll have you on your feet shortly. As the massive blue creature left the room, Xavier's gaze softened. It is a lot to take in, I know. A new country, a new home, a new reality. But I want you to know this, Izuku, and I want you to believe it. You are safe here. No one will harm you. No one will judge you. All we ask is that you be willing to learn. Learn to control it? Izuku asked, glancing at his casted arm. Yes. But also to learn about the world, about yourself, and about your place in it, Xavier said. Our dream is of a world where humans and mutants can coexist peacefully. It is a difficult dream, and one that many believe is impossible. But it is a dream worth fighting for. And I believe you, Izuku, have a significant role to play in that fight, should you choose to accept it. Before Izuku could reply, a tray of food arrived, not hospital rations, but real food. Scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of orange juice. He ate ravenously, the simple meal feeling like the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. As he finished, the door opened again. A young woman, probably a year or two older than him, bounced into the room. She had long brown hair, a bright, friendly face, and was wearing a simple yellow and black t-shirt with the letter X on it. She had an irrepressible energy that immediately filled the room. Professor? You wanted to see me? She asked, then her eyes landed on Izuku. Oh. You're the new kid. Hi. I'm Kitty Pryde. Welcome to the madhouse. She stuck out a hand, then seemed to realize his right arm was in a cast and his left had in 4-line. She awkwardly retracted it. Oops. Sorry. Force of habit. Kitty, this is Izuku Midoriya. Xavier introduced them. Izuku, Kitty is one of our senior students and a member of the X-Men. I was hoping you might be willing to show him around the mansion, help him get acclimated. Totally, Kitty said with an infectious grin. The grand tour it is. But first things first. She turned to a nearby closet and pulled out a set of folded clothes. They were simple gray sweatpants, and another one of the black t-shirts with the yellow X emblem. Can't have you walking around in a hospital gown. It's a bad look. The infirmary bathroom is through there. Yell if you need help, but try not to, 'cause Hank gets all weirdly professional, and it's kinda awkward. Izuku, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, carefully managed to change. The clothes were soft and comfortable. When he emerged, Beast was there to remove his foreline. "All right, you're free to go," the blue mutant said. "But take it easy. No strenuous activity. And if you feel any dizziness or a sudden spike in pain, you come straight back here. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Dr. Beast, sir," Izuku mumbled. Beast chuckled. "Just Hank will do fine, son. Or Beast. Whichever you prefer." With a final nod from the professor, Kitty Pryde took the lead. "Okay, new kid. Let's go see the sights. First stop, refreshment." She led him out of the infirmary and into a long, stately hallway. The place was enormous. Polished hardwood floors, high ceilings, walls adorned with elegant paintings and tapestries. It looked less like a school and more like a palace. Students of all ages milled about, chatting and laughing as they headed to class. And they were all so different. A girl with iridescent, insect-like wings walked past, deep in conversation with a boy who seemed to be made of living ice. A younger kid sat on a windowsill, concentrating intensely as he made a set of pens float in a circle around his head. No one stared. No one pointed. No one seemed to think any of it was strange. It was just normal. A new kind of normal that Izuku had never imagined. "So, this is the main hall," Kitty said, gesturing around. "Classrooms are mostly on the east wing, dorms are on the west. Cafeteria's downstairs. And the best soda machine is just around this corner." She led him down another hallway and stopped in front of a vending machine. "What's your poison?" "We got the basics, cola, root beer, orange." Cola is fine," Izuku said, still feeling shy. "Cola it is," Kitty said brightly. She looked at the machine, then at the empty hallway. She grinned conspiratorially. "Okay, check this out. But don't tell Scott I did this. He gets all misuse of powers for personal gain on me." She put her hand flat against the glass front of the machine. For a second, nothing happened. Then, her hand sank into it. It passed through the solid glass and plastic as if it were water, a faint ripple of light marking the point of entry. Izuku's eyes went wide. She rummaged around for a second, her arm submerged up to the elbow, and then pulled out a can of cola, her hand becoming solid again the moment it was clear. The machine remained perfectly intact. She tossed him the can. "Tada! My mutant power! Phasing. I can walk through walls. Pretty cool, huh?" Izuku fumbled with the can, his mind completely blown. In Japan, a power like that would have been classified, studied for infiltration purposes, and its user would have been under constant HPSC surveillance. Here, it was used to get a free soda. The culture shock was a physical blow. "That's amazing," he breathed, looking from the can to her. It has its uses," she said with a shrug, then her expression softened. "Look, I get it. This is a lot. The big blue guy, the teleporting demon, the guy with claws, it's weird. But it's home. Everyone here has a story. Everyone here was scared or alone at some point. You'll fit right in." Her easy acceptance was a balm on his frayed nerves. He took a sip of the cola, the cold, sweet fizz a small anchor to reality in this sea of strangeness. Kitty's tour continued. She showed him the vast library, where Beast was already back at a desk, surrounded by towering stacks of books. She pointed out the bustling cafeteria, the comfortable-looking student lounge, and the beautifully manicured gardens where a striking woman with long white hair was tending to a collection of exotic plants, a small, localized rain cloud watering them for her. "That's Aurora Monroe," Kitty whispered. "Storm. She's one of the teachers. And basically a goddess. Do not get on her bad side. She once made it hail in Scott's room for a week because he criticized her lesson plan." Finally, she led him to a heavy, reinforced door at the end of a long, descending corridor. It looked far more industrial than the rest of the mansion. Okay, Kitty said, her voice dropping an octave. Behind this door is the cool stuff. The danger room, the workshops, the blackbird hangar. This is where we train. As if on cue, the door slid open and two men walked out, deep in a heated discussion. One was tall and lean, with short brown hair and a pair of distinctive ruby quartz sunglasses. He carried himself with the stiff, formal posture of a soldier. The other was Logan, the man with the claws, now dressed in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, smelling faintly of motor oil and cigar smoke. And I'm telling you, the new Sentinel schematics show a clear vulnerability in the cervical actuator. The man in the sunglasses was saying, his voice sharp and authoritative. If we can get a precise enough strike, forget precise, Slim. Logan grunted. You get me close enough, I'll pop its head off like a bottle cap. Problem solved. They both stopped when they saw Kitty and Izuku. Kitty, the man in the sunglasses said, his tone instantly shifting to that of a concerned teacher. You shouldn't have him down here. Hank said he needs to rest. We were just looking, Scott, Kitty said defensively. He's fine. Scott's gaze, hidden behind the red glasses, fell on Izuku. It wasn't a hostile look, but it was intense. Appraising. This was the leader, Izuku realized. The one Kitty was afraid of. Scott Summers, he said, his voice clipped and formal. He didn't offer a hand. I lead the X-Men. I read your file. You caused a lot of damage. The statement was blunt, matter-of-fact. It made Izuku flinch. I didn't mean, I know, Scott interrupted, though not unkindly. Intention doesn't change the outcome. That's the first lesson you learn here. Your power is a responsibility, whether you asked for it or not. We'll be working together in the danger room once Hank clears you. We're going to find out exactly what you can do, and we're going to teach you how not to level a city block every time you do it. His tone was stern, but there was a flicker of something else there. Not empathy, precisely, but understanding. The understanding of someone who also wielded a terrifyingly destructive power he had to keep in check every second of every day. Logan just grunted, looking Izuku up and down. His gaze lingered on the cast. Kid, you survived, he said, his voice a low gravelly rumble. That's step one. He then turned and walked away, leaving Izuku with the feeling of having just been judged and found potentially adequate. Before Scott could continue his lecture, another person emerged from the training area. A woman with stunning, deep red hair and kind, green eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her presence was immediately calming, a gentle wave of warmth that pushed back against Scott's stern intensity. Scott, give the boy a break, she said, her voice melodic. He only just arrived. She smiled at Izuku, and he felt a faint, pleasant hum in the back of his mind. It wasn't an invasion like Xavier's direct communication. It was more like standing next to a warm fire. Hello, Izuku. I'm Jean Grey, she said. It's good to have you with us. We were all very worried. The psychic presence gently brushed against his own, not reading his thoughts but soothing his anxieties. He felt the tension in his shoulders release, the nervousness he'd been carrying since he woke up finally dissipating. It's a lot, Izuku managed to say. I know, Jean said, her smile never wavering. But you're not alone anymore. The dynamic was clear. Scott was the strict, demanding commander. Jean was the compassionate heart of the team. Together, they were a formidable pair. All right, Scott said, seeming to relent under Jean's gaze. Tour's over. Kitty, take him to his room. He needs to rest. Kitty gave a mock salute. Aye, fearless leader. She led him up several flights of stairs to the west wing, the dormitory section of the mansion. The hallway was quieter here, lined with doors bearing the names of their occupants. She stopped in front of a plain, unmarked door at the end of the hall. And this is home sweet home, she said, pushing it open. The room was simple, but spacious. A comfortable-looking bed, a desk, a closet, and a large window that overlooked the same magnificent grounds he had seen from the infirmary. It was more space than he'd had in his entire life. It's a bit basic, but you can decorate it however you want, Kitty said, leaning against the doorframe. My room's just down the hall, so if you need anything, just yell. Or knock. Knocking is probably better. She gave him one last bright smile. Get some rest, Izuku. You look like you've been through a war. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Izuku stood alone in the center of his new room. He walked to the window and looked out. He saw students on the lawn below. The boy made of ice was creating a small, intricate sculpture for a group of younger children. The girl with the wings was soaring high above the trees, her laughter carrying on the wind. He looked at his own reflection in the glass. The freckled face, the wild green hair, the black X t-shirt. He touched the cast on his arm, the fan to make a constant reminder of the destructive power lurking inside him. In Japan, that power had made him a monster, a prisoner. Here it just made him one of them. He was surrounded by people who were just as different, just as dangerous, just as gifted. He thought of Beast's intelligent eyes, Kitty's easy friendship, Jean's calming presence, Scott's stern sense of duty, and Logan's gruff pragmatism. They were a family, as strange and dysfunctional as it might be. He was thousands of miles from the only home he had ever known. His mother was alone, probably terrified. The HPSC was probably hunting him. The world he had left behind saw him as a terrorist. The future was uncertain and fraught with peril, but as he looked out at the sun-drenched lawn of the Xavier Institute, for the first time since that catastrophic moment in the alleyway, Izuku Midoriya didn't feel afraid. He felt like he was, finally, home. The next 6 weeks were a blur of pain, progress, and profound re-education. Izuku Midoriya's life settled into a strange and demanding rhythm, a pendulum swinging between two diametrically opposed, yet equally vital, philosophies. His days were bookended by two formidable tutors, Professor Charles Xavier and the man called Logan. One sought to build a hero. The other was determined to forge a weapon. Izuku, caught between them, simply tried to survive. His mornings began in the quiet solitude of Professor Xavier's study. The room itself was a sanctuary of learned tranquility, smelling of old leather, lemon polish, and Earl Grey tea. Sunlight streamed through the tall, mullioned windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, lazy fairies. Here, there was no talk of combat, no mention of destructive force. Here, the battle was entirely internal. The mind is the first and final battlefield, Izuku, Professor Xavier would say, his voice a calm anchor in the turbulent sea of Izuku's anxieties. He sat opposite Izuku, a chessboard between them more for atmosphere than for play. Your mutation is tied intrinsically to your emotional and kinetic state. It is a sponge, absorbing everything around you and within you. Before you can hope to control the output, you must first learn to regulate the input. Their sessions were a form of intensive mental and emotional therapy. Xavier never forced his way into Izuku's mind. He acted as a guide, teaching Izuku how to navigate the chaotic landscape of his own psyche. He taught him meditation techniques, breathing exercises designed to lower his heart rate and quiet the frantic, analytical muttering that was his constant companion. Your muttering, Xavier explained one morning, after Izuku had spent 5 minutes subconsciously dissecting the tactical weaknesses of a knight on the chessboard, is a symptom of an brilliant but undisciplined mind. It races, seeking patterns, seeking solutions. It is a wonderful tool for analysis, but a terrible master for control. Your power listens to that frantic energy. It feeds on it. To control the flood, you must first learn to be the calm at the center of the storm. They worked on visualization. Xavier would have Izuku close his eyes and picture his power not as a catastrophic explosion, but as a vast, deep lake within him. For weeks, the lake in his mind's eye was a churning, violent tempest, waves crashing against the shores of his consciousness. Do not try to fight the storm, Izuku, Xavier coached gently. Observe it. Understand its currents. Find its source. The storm is your fear, your desperation, your self-doubt. Acknowledge these feelings, give them a name. And then, bit by bit, let them settle. Slowly, painstakingly it began to work. The mental tempest calmed to a roiling sea, then to a choppy lake, and on his best days, to a vast expanse of water with a merely unsettled surface. He learned to feel the ambient energy he was absorbing, the kinetic bustle of the students in the hallways, the emotional energy of a heated classroom debate, the sheer life force of the mansion itself, and to consciously wall it off, to keep it from feeding his own inner turmoil. It was exhausting work, more draining than any physical exercise. These sessions were also where Izuku wrestled with the moral and philosophical implications of his new life. He was riddled with guilt. Guilt over the destruction he'd caused, guilt over the fear he'd instilled in his mother, guilt over abandoning his home. To be a hero, Izuku, Xavier told him, his blue eyes full of a deep, sorrowful wisdom, is to carry a weight that others cannot. The choices are never easy, and the consequences are often painful. You saved Katsuki Bakugo's life. That is a fact. The destruction was a tragic, unintended consequence of an uncontrolled power. You mourn the damage, you learn from the mistake, but you do not let the guilt of the accident negate the truth of the heroic act. To do so is to allow fear to win. Xavier spoke of his dream, of a world where mutants and humans could coexist. He didn't paint it as an easy or even likely future. He spoke of prejudice, of hatred, of men like William Stryker and Bolivar Trask who saw mutants as a plague to be eradicated. He spoke of his old friend, Eric Lencher, Magneto, who had seen that same hatred and chosen a different path, a path of dominance born from pain. Eric believes that our power gives us the right to rule, to protect ourselves by becoming the masters, Xavier said, his expression somber. I believe our power gives us the responsibility to serve, to protect everyone by being the better angels of our nature. It is a harder path, Izuku. It requires you to absorb the hatred of the world and reflect back only compassion and strength. It requires you to be a shield as much as a sword. In these morning sessions, Izuku began to rebuild his shattered idealism. He saw that his dream of being a hero wasn't childish or foolish. It was just more complex and painful than he could have ever imagined. Xavier was giving him the philosophical armor, the moral compass, to wield a power that could unmake the world. And then, every afternoon, Logan would try his best to shatter it. The danger room was the polar opposite of Xavier's study. It was a place of brutal, unforgiving reality. A vast, cavernous chamber of shifting metal plates and holographic projectors. It could replicate any environment, any threat, from a simple street brawl to an attack by a 50-foot killer robot. The air buzzed with latent energy and smelled of ozone, hot metal, and Logan's cheap cigars. Forget all that Zen crap the professor's feeding ya, Logan growled on their first day. He stood in the center of the empty chamber, arms crossed over his chest. Izuku stood opposite him, his right arm finally out of its cast. It was still weak, the skin a road map of faint scars, and a constant, deep ache still resonated in the bone. Dr. McCoy had designed a supportive, flexible brace for it, but it felt fragile, like a glass sculpture. Peace and understanding won't stop a sentinel's fist from going through your skull, Logan continued, his voice a gravelly rumble. Out here, there's no time for meditation. There's action, and there's reaction. You hesitate, you die. Your enemy ain't gonna wait for you to find your happy place. Logan's training philosophy was simple. Pain is the best teacher. He believed Izuku's power was a wild animal, and the only way to tame it was to beat it into submission. Their first sessions were disastrous. Logan would start a simple program, a handful of holographic ninja armed with plasma swords. Izuku's task was just to dodge, but the moment the threat became real, the moment his adrenaline spiked, his control would shatter. The calm lake from his morning meditation would instantly become a raging tsunami. He tried to throw a punch, intending to tap into a tiny fraction of his power. He'd visualize a gentle push. But his fear, his desperation to succeed, would pour into the metaphorical reservoir. The result was never a gentle push. A shockwave would erupt from his fist, missing the holograms entirely and blowing a 10-foot hole in the danger room wall. And then would come the pain. The backlash was agonizing. It felt like his arm was being ripped apart from the inside. The first time it happened, his newly healed bones fractured instantly. The snap was sickeningly loud in the sudden silence of the chamber. Izuku collapsed, screaming, clutching the ruined limb. The program shut down. Logan was at his side in an instant, his expression unreadable. He hoisted Izuku up, half carrying him towards the infirmary. Pain's telling you something, kid, Logan said, his voice rough but not unkind. It's telling you where your limit is. Right now your limit is 0. So you get patched up, and tomorrow we try again. We find the limit, and then we push it. And so the cycle began. Every afternoon, Izuku would enter the danger room. Every afternoon, he would fail. He would try to channel his power, and every afternoon, he would break himself, his arm, his legs, his ribs. He spent more time in the infirmary than in his own dorm room, becoming intimately familiar with the whir of Hank's bone-knitting devices and the sympathetic, yet increasingly frustrated, sighs of Beast himself. Izuku, your body's cellular regeneration is remarkable, likely a secondary aspect of your mutation, Hank explained one evening, resetting his radius and ulna for the third time that month. But you are tearing yourself apart faster than you can heal. This approach of brute force, it's unsustainable. Izuku would just nod, his face pale with pain and shame. He felt like a failure. He could talk philosophy with the professor all morning, but in the arena where it mattered, he was a liability, a walking bomb with a faulty trigger. The other students started giving him a wide berth, their expressions a mixture of pity and fear. He was the glass cannon, the boy who broke himself. Logan, however, was relentless. He saw the shame, the fear, and he pushed harder. You think this is tough? He'd bark, standing over Izuku as he writhed on the floor of the danger room. Out there, the real world, it don't pull its punches. When a purifier mob has a kid cornered, you gonna have time to worry about a broken arm? When Magneto's tearing a city apart, you gonna tell him to take a 5-minute break while you heal up? It was brutal. It was cruel. But somewhere, deep down, Izuku knew Logan was right. His idealism, his desire to save everyone, was meaningless if he couldn't survive the first punch. Logan wasn't just teaching him to fight. He was teaching him to endure. He was forcing Izuku to confront the violent, ugly potential of his own power, to accept it as a part of himself. Your power is a weapon, kid, Logan told him one afternoon, after a particularly bad break. They were sitting on the floor of the silent danger room, the smell of burnt metal thick in the air. You can call it a gift, you can call it a curse, you can call it whatever you want. Doesn't change what it is. It's a tool for violence. The professor wants you to be a good man, I want you to be a dangerous man. The trick is learning how to be both at the same time. He lit a cigar, the smoke curling around his head. Chuck thinks you can tame the beast. I think you gotta learn to ride it. Let it be wild, but you gotta be the one holding the reins. This was the core of Izuku's conflict. Xavier was teaching him to be the calm, immovable center. Logan was teaching him to ride the hurricane, and his body was the battleground where these two philosophies clashed. The breakthrough, when it came, wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of quiet desperation. He was a month and a half into his training. His right arm was currently in a state of semi-permanent ache, encased in a newly designed gauntlet by Beast. It was a more robust piece of equipment, forged from a vibranium steel alloy, with a network of energy-channeling conduits that were supposed to help him focus the output. So far, it had only resulted in slightly more focused, but equally self-destructive, blasts. Logan had programmed a new scenario. It wasn't ninjas or robots. It was a holographic recreation of the alleyway in Musitifa. The rubble, the burning cars, the screaming civilians, and in the center of it, a holographic sludge villain holding a holographic Bakugo. The sight sent a jolt of ice-cold dread through Izuku. This ain't about power, kid, Logan's voice echoed from the control booth. It's about control. Relive it. But this time, do it right. Just a push. Enough to knock the villain off balance. Nothing more. Izuku's heart hammered in his chest. The simulation was too real. The phantom smells of smoke and sewage filled his nostrils. He could hear Bakugo's choked gasps. His carefully constructed mental calm shattered. The lake became a maelstrom. He lunged forward, just as he had before. He drew back his fist, the gauntlet humming with power. He saw the villain surging towards him. He saw Bakugo's terrified face. I have to save him. He felt the telltale surge, the uncontrolled flood of power building in his arm. He knew what was coming. Another catastrophic blast. Another broken limb. Another failure. No. Not again. In that split second of desperation, he remembered something from both of his teachers. Xavier's voice, find the calm at the center of the storm. And Logan's, you gotta be the one holding the reins. He couldn't stop the storm. He couldn't calm the flood. It was too late. But maybe he could redirect it. Instead of trying to suppress the power, he accepted it. He let the wave of energy flow into his arm. But at the last possible second, instead of letting it detonate from his fist, he did something different. He remembered his analytical muttering, his obsession with the heroes of his youth. He remembered All Might, one for all. Full cowl. The name meant nothing here, but the principle, the image of it, was everything. All Might didn't just punch with his arm. He used his whole body. Izuku made a conscious, agonizing decision. He didn't try to contain the energy to just his fist. He relaxed his shoulder, his elbow, his wrist, and at the same time, tensed every other muscle in his body. He opened the floodgates. He pictured the immense, raw power not as a single explosion, but as a river, and he willed it to flow. It surged through his arm, but instead of detonating, a fraction of it, a tiny, manageable percentage, was allowed to escape from his fist. The rest of it, the vast, catastrophic overload, he deliberately channeled through his own body. The pain was biblical. It was 1,000 times worse than just breaking his arm. It felt like every cell in his body was being set on fire. The energy surged down his torso, his legs, grounding itself through his feet into the floor of the danger room. His muscles seized, his nerves screamed, and for a moment, he thought his heart would stop. He was the cardboard tube, and he had just willingly channeled the cannonball's blast through himself to save the cannon. But the effect was perfect. From his fist came not a shockwave, but a focused blast of air, no bigger than a cannonball. It shot across the alley and struck the holographic villain squarely in its solid eye. The hologram flickered and dissipated. The holographic Bakugo fell to the ground, safe. The street, the buildings, everything else was untouched. Izuku collapsed onto his hands and knees, smoke rising from his skin. He was shaking violently, every muscle spasming. He wasn't broken, not in the skeletal sense. But he was burned, from the inside out. He felt like he'd been struck by lightning. He looked at his right arm. The gauntlet was glowing cherry red, but the arm inside, while screaming in protest, was intact. Silence. Logan emerged from the control booth, walking slowly towards him. He knelt down, his expression uncharacteristically serious. He looked at the dissipated hologram, at the untouched surroundings, and then at the trembling boy on the floor. What was that? Logan asked, his voice low. I couldn't stop it. Izuku gasped, his voice trembling. So, I let it through. I used my whole body, as a lightning rod, to bleed off the excess. Logan was quiet for a long moment, processing. He'd seen a lot of things in his long life. He'd never seen anything like this. The kid had taken a nuke's worth of energy, let a tiny fraction of it out with surgical precision, and willingly absorbed the rest of the cataclysmic backlash into his own body. It wasn't a show of power. It was an act of supreme, insane, unbelievable self-control and sacrifice. He hadn't tamed the beast. He hadn't ridden it. He had become the cage. A slow, grim smile spread across Logan's face. It was the first time Izuku had ever seen him truly smile. Holy hell, kid! Logan breathed, a note of genuine awe in his voice. The professor wants to build a hero. I wanted to forge a weapon. He clapped a heavy hand on Izuku's trembling shoulder. Looks like we're gonna get both. That night, Izuku didn't go to the infirmary. He limped back to his dorm, every inch of his body screaming in a new and terrible way. It wasn't the sharp pain of a break, but the deep, resonant agony of cellular damage. But it was a different kind of pain. It was the pain of progress. He collapsed onto his bed, utterly spent. He had found a way. A terrible, agonizing, self-destructive way, but a way nonetheless. He could control the output, but the price was his own body. The equation was simple. To save others from his power, he had to inflict that power upon himself. He thought of Xavier's words, to be a hero is to carry a weight that others cannot. He looked at his red, throbbing arm, at the state-of-the-art gauntlet that beast had built, and he understood. The gauntlet wasn't the better tube. He was. His pain, his endurance, his willingness to suffer, that was the true containment field for his power. The path forward was clear, and it was paved with agony. But for the first time since coming to the mansion, Izuku Midoriya didn't feel like a liability. He felt the first, faint stirrings of a hero. A broken, scarred, and aching hero, perhaps. But a hero all the same. He had found his limit, and tomorrow, with Logan's brutal guidance, he would learn to push it.